Good evening, everybody. Welcome to our Tuesday night special interviews with fascinating people. And we've got some very fascinating people with us. We all know what's been going on over the last couple of weeks, and there's nobody who's better equipped to relate to us the campus chaos than the Chabad shluchim. We have with us tonight Rabbi Mendy Weg, Chabad at Northwestern, and a student, David Leshem. So first of all, thank you very much for joining us. We know you must be very, very busy and overwhelmed, and everybody wants to talk to you and hear about what's going on. So let's get started. Rabbi, if you would just give us a little background about yourself and about some of the activities, and if you could, take us to October 7th, and where were you and how did you learn about what happened? And then, David, if you would do the same, just give us a little bit of your background, introduce yourself to us. What year are you in? What are you studying? What's your involvement like in Chabad? Just a little meet and greet.
Hi, everybody. My name is Rabbi Mendy, and we are shluchim at Northwestern. We moved to Evanston in August of 2017, so we're here for about 7 years. And I grew up in Tulsa, Oklahoma. My parents do Chabad in Oklahoma, and then went a bunch of other places, and I'm now happy to be here. Growing up in Tulsa and spending time in New York, I always like to say that Evanston is the happy medium. It's not exactly as busy as it is in New York, but it's has a little bit more character and more diversity than I would find in Tulsa. So things have been really, really busy here and engaging for the positive. We'll hear more about it soon. We'll be happy to talk more, and more specifically where I was on October 7th. It's an interesting question. We were in shul, and there's a student here who's a student at Kellogg. He's in the MBA program. He's here from Israel, and he's been coming around, and we developed a relationship. We were in touch with him before he came and became actually a student, an active student here. And he came to shul on that morning, and I saw on his face right away something was amiss. I thought maybe something, God forbid, happened to his family. Something happened. I took him, I said, let's go outside, let's talk. What's up? He said, do you hear what's going on in Israel? It's not normal. It's crazy. The government said it's war. I'm like, what do you mean war? We do operations every couple of months. There's operation this, operation that. He's like, no, this is different. He said, I'm going back. This was that morning. He said, I'm going back. There may be consequences from school, but I need to go back and be with my people. He came into shul, and he went to the Aron Kodesh. He said, I went to the Ark. He said a prayer, and he was on his way. And it's really, it's like history repeating itself. I'm not that old, but the way people describe the Yom Kippur War, it's exactly, there's a song about it you may be familiar with. It's exactly what it felt like. But he made it, and he's a medic. He would be constantly going in and out of Gaza to rescue wounded soldiers. He's back here now, thank God. He's well. But that's how we learned of the developments.
Wow. Okay, David, give us a little bit about yourself. Where are you from? What year are you in? What are you studying? And where were you on October 7th?
Yep. Okay. So, hi everyone. I'm David. I'm from Highland Park originally, and now I'm at Northwestern. I'm a senior, so finishing up. I study math, and I guess on October 7th, when I really grasped what was going on, it was at Chabad. I think we were there for Simchat Torah that night on the 7th. And Rabbi Mendy spoke a little bit about it because he had heard from the Kellogg student, and that was sort of when it began to sink in. I think me and a couple of the other students who were there had special ties to Israel, still have special ties to Israel. And I think it hit us a little harder. I think it made the night an interesting one and kind of a somber one, even though it was a chag and it was supposed to be a celebration. And that was sort of my first hearing of what was going on in Israel.
Okay, so of course this is unspeakable tragedies and the brutality. We don't have to harp on that, but what shocked me, and this is what I've loved to hear about you being right there, mamash on the ground, is the not only lack of sympathy and empathy, but somehow this got turned around into being attacking Jews or Israel, not from the so-called, sort of buffoons, but from the elite of the academic world, and Northwestern included, along with, quote, our elite universities. These are not dummies. How did you first experience that? And what is the ongoing sense on campus and amongst the students about just being totally shocked by this? Were you caught off guard? Is this something maybe that you who are there in the middle of it almost expected? How did that play out in your experience?
I guess, yeah, I can go ahead. So I would say in the days, or immediately after October 7th, the school was generally, pretty understanding of what the Jewish community was going through, and students like me. We held a really nice vigil on one of the nights, a weeknight I remember, and I had friends who had class, and they were able to get out of their class, very easily. Like, professors were super understanding of the situation. But then, we went away for winter break and we came back, and I felt like, the war was still going on, and all of a sudden, sort of the feelings that people felt towards Israel or towards the Jews on campus kind of just changed overnight. And there was a lot, I have peers who were in classes who had, professors express their beliefs, which, is wrong. I had, professors portraying the story as like from only one side and not really giving all the details. And it
Can I
had,
just jump in there? When you say
yeah,
professors, are these professors of Middle Eastern studies? Are these history professors? Or is this the
yeah.
physics professor just using his platform to rail against the Jews in Israel?
No, none of the, math or science professors or any of those professors of that type were really getting into it. It was more so in school of journalism or school of, or history department, things of that nature. And I guess that was the most surprising thing to me. I've been here for 4 years, and when I was a freshman, there was a small episode of fighting and rocket attack between Israel and Gaza in May of 2021, and even then sparked some sort of I don't know, discussion and debate between students on campus. And so I knew that always, was existed and laid kind of underneath a sort of, I don't know, umbrella. And this latest escalation really sort of brought everyone out, and kind of turned people against each other. Whereas, usually on campus we're nice and friendly with each other. This sort of turned people against one another, and that was surprising.
Wow. Now, you said you grew up in Highland Park.
Yeah.
Had you ever experienced such blatant anti-Semitism, just unmasked, uncouched? And what was that like to experience it in a place of higher education?
Yeah, never in my life. In all honesty, I remember the first time I experienced something like that. I was visiting Duke University in North Carolina with my mom, and we were walking around, and all of a sudden entered their main quad area, and there were these huge protest demonstration against Israel, against the Jewish people. And that in that moment, my mom and I kind of looked at each
I
other,
ain't
and
going to Duke.
we were like, Duke's not happening. And I came home. I had an older brother at the time who went to Northwestern, and I showed him photos of that, and he was like, I've never seen anything like that at Northwestern. That doesn't happen in Evanston. You'll be fine here, just settle close to home and it's gonna be okay. And so I guess I came in with the expectation of Northwestern being a place where I would always be like free and safe to express my Judaism and my pro-Israel beliefs. But I think it's changed a lot. The school I go to today is different from the one I, applied to 4 years ago.
Oh, wow. Now, Rabbi, what have you heard and seen from students? Have you heard and seen the students who are threatened, who have been blocked from going to class, the things that we're hearing on the news? What is it like for the just, your average kid who's wants to go to class and wants to do their assignments, take their tests, go to the basketball games and just sort of have a college experience? What are you hearing from the students there at Northwestern over the last couple of months?
Well, I'll say let's tone it down. I think that there's issues and challenges that the college student experiences today that are, even if they could go to their class, they're not physically barred, or nobody's punched in the nose, there's still a climate that's not conducive to education, not conducive to feeling protected and having what you need to be the best student, the best human, the best person
I don't think I heard.
that you can be. So it's definitely, there's everybody, we get to see a wide range of reactions and experiences, because in our role we try to exhibit within range, being the adult we can be. We always tell people we're not mom and dad, but we try to be a close second. And when we're in that role, we get exposed to a lot of different, each student will either have different experiences or translate those experiences differently. And in light of that, we felt it was very important to sort of not to lock ourselves into any specific defined conclusion to what is going on. And I make this parallel to like the beginning of COVID. Things were fluid, things were constantly changing, and what was right today was not necessarily right in a couple of weeks, and what was right in 2 months from now may have not been right, 6 weeks ago. And we very, very much see that, because there's like a cycle that ends up happening. There's like an initial shock when experience like this happens, and then people try to process it. And then people may have, even without being punched in the nose, like, metaphorically or actually, there's tens of students who have lost friend groups, right? They had to leave their group chats. Like that's ridiculous. I know people who live in a house, they live off campus, they're upperclassmen, and they were cautious with how they spoke on the phone with their family, because they had friends, peers, and so on around them. So I think that it's important to understand that the student experience that I think is very common, unrelated to being barred from going into a classroom or something escalating like that, is one that is inappropriate and wrong and not conducive to growth.
Now, Rabbi, you've been there for 7 years. David, you've been there for 4 years. Do you have any analysis, like how did we get here? How did we get that the elite universities in our country, the choice of the best students and the tenured professors who are just so blatant with their Jew hatred, with their anti-Semitism, with their anti-Israel, like for us outside of that system, I think it caught me by surprise. And I thought, well, this is crazy. This will fizzle out. These people are going to come to their senses. And it's only seemed to have gotten worse. Do you have any insight into where did we go so wrong?
Yeah, I mean, okay. So what I've been telling people and what I believe to be true is that I think it's more than just Gaza and the war. I think this whole latest movement is sort of just like a culmination of things that have been boiling underneath for a while. I think over time, students at the school like are separated. It's not designed this way, but people tend to hang out and spend time with people who are similar to them. And there are specific social groups of people who majority Jews, and then there are groups of people who aren't friends with any Jews on campus. And I think over time, there's issues and there's differences between like classes and majors, and all these different differences between people sort of pit one another together. I've been telling my friends that Gaza's been around for our whole lives, basically. The whole issue of Gaza has existed. And a year ago, there was no encampment, there was no protest, there was no demonstration in support or solidarity with Gaza. I think this is just a reaction to, I think, a bunch of other issues sort of boiling up and over, and the war obviously being a major one.
When you walk around and you saw these encampments, did you recognize any of the people there? Say, hey, I take math with you, or we played volleyball last week. What was that like?
Yeah, that's probably been the weirdest thing to navigate since the encampment began. I mean, there were people who I, go out socially or see them walking around, people from my classes who we used to work on projects together, and then I would, make eye contact with them at the encampment because I spent some time there counter protesting, and I think that really made things weird. Part of me is grateful I'm a senior, because beyond senior year, I don't know if I'm gonna have to, or I mean, I don't know if I'm gonna continue my relationships with some of those people, but I feel worse. I have a younger brother who is friends. He's a sophomore here, and he is, I mean, lost friends over this issue. He's had friends who he's grown really close with over the first 2 years at school, who feel different or have different political views than him, and now he has 2 more years here and lost a couple of friends. So that's interesting.
Wow, that must have been frightening.
Yeah.
Now, what if you could have a rational conversation with some, blonde-haired kid from Underline who's out there in the encampment, do you think they really understand what they're doing? Do they really hate you, or they're just caught up in the thrill of it, in the romantic sense of protest?
Yeah.
Any insight there?
Yeah, I think again that's like it's a spectrum because there are some students who wake up every morning and read whichever news station or channel they want and then get their information from that. But there are other students, and I think the majority of students in the encampment were students who really didn't know what was going on. A quick little story was I had a friend of mine, one of my roommates, was doing a podcast on the encampment for a journalism class at Northwestern and walked through the encampment with a microphone just to gather some sound bites. And they were chanting inside the encampment, Palestine since 48. And then he got the soundbite of a huge chunk of kids were chanting Palestine is 48 because they clearly don't know the history and don't understand what's actually going on. So I think personally, and with all the interactions I have with people who were in there, I think it almost turned into more of like a social gathering or one where people could have fun. It was nice out, sit on the lawn and sort of feel like they're doing something productive when they don't truly understand everything that they're siding with.
And what's going on currently is the encampments have been disbanded. I mean, is it sort of settled down? I don't want you don't have to comment on the specifics of the president of Northwestern made some sort of deal, but do you get the sense that it sort of fizzled out and it was like a fad for most of these kids?
Yeah, I think it's definitely fizzled out. There's still a tent set up on the Deering Meadow, but it's way less active. I'd say there's, at any given moment, probably 5 or 10 students there. There's some signs and flags around it, and I don't like to see it still, but I think the agreement with the school is that they're allowed to demonstrate until June 1st. So 10 more days, and then it should all be packed up. So it's still there, but I think tensions overall on campus are much cooler now than they were a couple weeks ago.
Okay, so Rabbi, you have people here online that they have kids, nephews, nieces, friends, kids, and so on heading off to school next year, whether it's to Northwestern or some other third-rate school. Um, what's your recommendation for them? Well, they're seeing what's going on. Their 17-year-old son or daughter or nephew or niece or friend's son or daughter. Rabbi, what can they do to steal them for showing up? God willing, the war will be over and so on, but there's some residue here that's not just going to go away. What would be your advice to parents ready to send their kids off to school in a couple of months?
I'll respond to that in a moment. I just want to make one more comment that came to my mind. The elite universities, quote unquote, are getting all the heat for the shenanigans, and it may very well be placed. But let's just zoom out for a second. In our recent past, our society has been one that people were worried about Thanksgiving dinner get-togethers because people have different views. And I'm not so old, but when I grew up, that wasn't a thing. You had differences of opinion, but we cut turkey together, and that was fine. And many places in society that's not the case. Hasn't been. Maybe it's been healed, but definitely the recent past it hasn't been like that. And in a way, it's the same thing that's going on campuses. There's just if you're taking what's in your head so far that you can't connect with another person, never mind if it's accurate or true or not. That's a good time for us to do some soul searching. And the way we fix the world is not by making big billboards, is by fixing ourselves and our communities, our surroundings. And maybe there's what to learn for our personal interactions in our, at work, at home, with our families. from what happens when things like that get magnified to this extent. And in yeshiva, we used to have this line: some people are so open-minded their brains fell out. So sometimes we got to be careful and make sure that we stick with what we need to be, what we need to stick with. About your question, if somebody has a rising freshman in the university and all this is going on, I think there's two things that come to mind. Number one, remember as a parent and as an adult that you have a certain perspective on things, and that's very important in guiding your children and the next generation. But also remember that you're seeing snippets and sound bites and headlines that may give you a sense that's a little different than the facts on the ground. So it's important to keep your finger on the pulse. It may be accurate, but it's also possible, sometimes people have children that are, overseas, and in Israel, they went to seminary, and you find out they had a cold, and people may freak out. Who knows what's going on? Are they getting the care they need and they're not in your care? And, there may be what to learn from that analogy and what's going on over here. Not that it doesn't exist, not that it's not important, not that it's not concerning, but to just keep everything in perspective. That's number one. Number two is something we speak with students about all the time. There's a story about a teacher that brought a jar into the classroom, and he had rocks and sand and gave it to the students to put back into the jar. And people tried, and they put the sand, the rocks, they couldn't figure it out. They couldn't get it all back inside. It was full. And what happened was they were filling it up with sand, and by the time it came to put in the rocks, there was no more space in the jar. It didn't fit. And the teacher explained that when you take that jar and you first put in the rocks, put in your anchors, and then you fill in the sand, then there's space for everything. And it's very important when you go to campus and when you leave the bubble or the cradle of your home, that you have a clear understanding, a clear picture of what those rocks are. Because if you can take those rocks and put them in your jar, in your life, in your soul, and your neshama, then some of the exterior things will end up being like sand. They won't consume as much, and they won't dictate your perspective on life and yourself. And I think that's important.
Wonderful. Okay. I told the rabbi it'd be about 20 minutes, and we're past our time. So if somebody wants to unmute and jump in with a quick question, that now's the time. Otherwise, we're going to say goodnight. If anyone's got a quick question that they like, we'd love to hear it.
Yeah. Hey, Rabbi, I actually have one question for Mendy and one for David. So for David, through all of this, have you changed the way you express your Judaism on campus, off campus? How has that affected you in any way? If it hasn't, that's fine too. I'm just curious. And Mendy, have you counseled students that have come in that have wanted to talk about that, to not like stay in the closet about being Jewish or public expression? So I'm just curious. Maybe just a quick answer from each of you would be great.
Yeah, no, I actually wanted to touch on that. I think since October 7th and everything that's happened since, I think, honestly, personally speaking, I've expressed my Judaism and my pro-Israel beliefs even more than I had before. And I think that's true for a lot of my friends and a lot of people that I associate here with on campus. I wish I could say that was the truth for everyone, but I think younger students were a little worried to be that outgoing and that pro-Israel. But I was part of the reason why I counter protested. I'll make this short, was that there weren't many counter protesters, but I wanted people walking by and passing to understand that it's okay to be pro-Israel and to be Jewish. It's okay to stand here and stand up for what you believe in, and nothing's going to happen to me. It's, don't be afraid, because we're going to be fine.
Good for you.
Yeah.
Good for you. Rabbi, what do you say? Should students hide their Yiddishkeit? Don't make such a big deal about it? I think you're going to say no.
They definitely should not. We should definitely always be unapologetically Jewish in all forms. There's a range of experiences, like we said earlier. there definitely were some people who, and especially in certain, for example, the theater kids tend to be very into drama, and they had a lot of peers that's, you know, that became problematic for a lot of Jews. But so there's definitely some people who were concerned. People definitely got comments, but people who were concerned and, you know, wouldn't wear the yarmulke. You know, parents were encouraging people to stay away from Jewish institutions out of fear of safety. And there are definitely people that had that experience. By the flip side, so this always teaches us that the Jews are like olives. And, you know, we always used to say, David can probably repeat it. We take apples and we smash them, we get applesauce. You take an olive and you squeeze it, you get the purest olive oil. And the Jews are like olives. And there's no question that we've been seeing a maintained, sustained engagement and excitement about Judaism. You know, the Seders have been beautiful and very large. Every Shabbos, it's over 100 students. Usually, you know, 120, 130, 150, those kind of numbers. And that's very, you know, that's very telling of how people are responding. One more thing I'll throw in is that people were definitely, they'll use this term, exhausted from having to be in environments that they either have to stick up for themselves or suppress their feelings. And we created a series of programs that were not only about Shabbos or only about having a Torah class or putting on tefillin or things like that, but we did for a while, Dinner with Your Tribe. And it was specifically no program, no agenda. It was just the opportunity for members of the tribe to get together and to just have that release, to not have to be tense, to not have to defend themselves or feel that they're being listened to. And we found a very, very strong, very, very receptive audience to those types of programs. Beautiful. So that's another dynamic, another dimension here that's a little more subtle, but important nonetheless.
Beautiful. Kol hakavod to both of you. Unless someone else has a question, we're going to let the rabbi and David go. Thank you both for being with us. Thank you for standing up strong, for giving us the real deal and the lowdown. David, mazel tov on your coming graduation. Thank you for sharing. Kol hakavod. Okay, everybody, we'll say goodnight. We'll see you tomorrow night for the laws about Pesach Sheni. Okay. Good night, everyone. Thanks again. Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you, David. You guys are great. Thank you.
Thanks.